Welcome to Modus Cafe. Join us for fun, lighthearted, and educational conversations around training, athletic longevity, and the human side of climbing, with your hosts, Mercedes Pollmeyer and Katja Dev. Okay, so today is a very special episode because it is the podcast anniversary. We've been doing this for 1 year. We've recorded 52 episodes, something like that. And we've released one episode every week since last year. And it's very exciting. I feel like staying consistent with something like this can be challenging. And so in today's episode, I think what we're going to do is talk about the podcast, why we started it, kind of where it's going. But we also want to talk about what it's like to run a business, and it's also a business anniversary for me. This is 5 years in business for Modus, which is really remarkable. And we're going to talk a little bit about the great things about running a business, also the downsides of running a business. So today is like an anniversary podcast, and we'll give you some of the behind the scenes of what it's like for us. But yeah, and I think for Katja, this will be like almost 3 years with Modus. You started in January. So that's also like huge, like kind of going on your own as well for the last 3 years. Yeah. So why don't we start with the podcast?
I just want to just briefly acknowledge, it's crazy. It's been a whole year. It's amazing how time flies, and it's amazing that we did it for a whole year, because I think we might have spent a whole year just talking about the podcast before we even started. Mm-hmm. And then we were like, okay, messy action. We just need to get started. Yeah. Because, we were trying to be maybe too perfectionist with getting it started and all the different options of, which platform are we going to do, YouTube, topics, logo. And that's kind of partially what we want to talk about a little bit today, kind of reviewing some things of what it's like being in business too, because it's one thing to be a coach and it's one thing to do coaching, but it's another thing to have your own business, and it's another thing to have your own podcast. And there's so much that goes into it. There's a lot of joy, of course, but there's so much else that goes into it. And really just reminds me of climbing, because as climbers, we love challenges, right? And we love sending, we love doing hard things, but it doesn't mean each piece of the preparation is always super fun. Your skin hurts, it's cold outside, we train when we don't want to train, we do all these things to, in the end, follow our passion. And I feel like doing your own business, running your own business, and the podcasts are very similar to me in that, I know you love it too, and I love what I'm doing, but it doesn't mean it's always easy along the way. And I'd love to hear what you have to say, because, you've been in business so much longer. I mean, you've been a coach for a very long time, but you've been running your own business for 5 years. And so I think the podcast, maybe we'll start with the podcast, but I'm more interested in the business side of things. The podcast is still like a little baby in some ways, right? We've been doing this for a year. One of the things that I think has been really wonderful is that we do come together each week with intention and thoughts, and we put them together. So from my perspective, I've just really enjoyed just spending that time with you, and talking about all these different things is kind of a very special time in my calendar. And it's been really amazing to actually get feedback from people too, like people actually listening to podcasts and being like, oh, I was listening to this, and and just hearing how people find it useful and inspirational and all the things. And that's definitely something that keeps me going. So what about you? What have you learned in the last year of podcasting?
Well, I did want to start with kind of like why we started it. And I think a big piece for me is that I really care about educating like our community. There is so much information, and almost too much information now. And now the goal for coaches is to try to distill the best information, or make information as concise as possible, and connect the dots a lot more to practicality in life. And I think the podcast was that was a big reason for me to really put a lot of energy into it, is to kind of deliver it in that way. Because there's just too much information now, and like what are our clients, what are climbers supposed to be following, and yeah, so probably the biggest goal for the podcast was education, but deliver the things that we think are the most important and most practical for climbers that we see. And yeah, another reason would be another reason that we started the podcast is to just get us out there. Like it does seem like a lot of people have podcasts, and the goal wasn't to be like the best podcast. It's just us talking about these really important things, and to just be out there, and so people can discover us that way. This has always been kind of like a more of a side project, rather than like this is going to be like the best climbing podcast. That's never been a goal of mine, but we love talking about this stuff. Like I hope y'all listeners can feel that and see that when Katja and I are talking. Like there are things we don't know, and I hope that we can be very truthful with that, and that we have been very truthful about that. But we try to also deliver like this information as best we can. And I don't know, I guess 1 year of podcasting has taught me a lot about what people want to hear. I also know, like, because the podcast isn't the platform that we're trying to push to the top, there's a lot of things that we don't do. So in terms of optimizing podcasting, I don't do any of that. Like, there's ways that you can title things, the ways that you can do the thumbnail on YouTube. All of that takes a lot of time. And Katja and we're coaches. That's like our main job. And then there's running the business, which is a huge job as well. And then the podcast kind of comes like third in line with that. And so by the time it comes down to, okay, now we need to like do the podcast, what we are focused on mostly is the content. And then hopefully everything else just falls into place. So I am really excited that our podcast has done so well with the least amount of optimization, I guess is what I'm going to call it. And that people still find this really helpful in their climbing journey and their life. So what I've learned is that you don't always have to go 100% all the time, just like in climbing training. And the people that find it helpful will reach out and say thank you or ask questions if they want to. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be the best in order to put yourself out there.
Yeah, totally. One of the things we also talked about when we started the podcast, we call it, Modus Cafe Conversations Beyond Climbing, because we just wanted to, kind of show up like as we are and who we are, right? And have it be as authentic as possible, and just have it be a conversation versus have it be an over delivery of more stuff. Because as you said, there's so much stuff online already. So we wanted to make sure it's more of a, not a filter, but like a way of like bringing thoughts together and maybe talk about what is really important and how do we think about things, in different ways, and just like being ourselves, in some ways. And I love what you said. I do think our podcast has, done so well, with just us showing up, and that's kind of what we want to do. And to me, that's really important too, because with all the social media out there and all these things out there, I feel like sometimes we have sort of a certain image of how people need to be in order to be successful, whether or not it's in climbing or in business. But in the end, everybody's just a person. Everybody's just human, and to me, what's kind of missing a little bit is just having more people out there who are, climbing inspirations, who are also normal people, who don't have a background in World Cup competition climbing or, whatever. And also who are just like, yeah, normal people like you and I. And we bring different aspects of life to the table. I'm a mom at the same time. We're both a little bit older. I don't love making us older than we are, because I very much believe we're like in the prime still. But I do think that people, at least most people that I know, once they turn 40, tell themselves this story of being old, and certainly a lot of, climbers out there tend to be a little bit younger, but I think it's just a perception because I did find this data. Remember, I showed you the graph that actually the bulk of the climbers right now in this country are 30 and 40 years old. So if you are 30 or 40 years old, you are part of the bulk of the climber. You are not old at all. You just right in the smack middle of the pack. So congratulations. You're very normal. Yeah. Yeah. It's been really fun.
Yeah.
So Mercedes, do you have any wishes, dreams, desires for the next year of podcasting?
You know, it's hard to say. I think like time is such a limited commodity, especially when you're running your own business. And yeah, you know, like there could be changes on the horizon. And my goal is just to keep this going, you know, as long as I can. But I'd really love to bring in more people into the podcast. It was really awesome having Steve on our podcast. I think those podcasts did excellent. We had a lot of fun with it. But I would love to just maybe make that more of, I guess, a framework is bringing people in, but it's not going to be interview style. You know, I would really love to just have conversations with other coaches or other professionals. And even, you know, we've had a couple member interviews. I'd love to like continue doing that. Like hearing from clients, because I think that those are some of the biggest lessons for, I think member interviews can really highlight the lessons learned in training when you're kind of talking to the people doing it. You know, if they're training and they're running into all these problems and then they overcome it, those are great stories to share. And those are things that you can learn from as well as a listener. So yeah, I think that's what I would like to do in the next year. So hopefully seeing more coaches on here sharing their expertise and just conversations. Continue the conversations.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, shall we transition to business stuff? That's Mercedes had this great idea because, you know, it's her 5-year anniversary and my 3-year anniversary is coming up. And it's actually been on our minds for a while to just openly and honestly talk a little bit about what it's like being coaches in general, the ups and downs, the advantages, disadvantages, whatever benefits, drawbacks, and passions that we have, but also what it's like running a business. Because in the end, you know, coaching is one thing, but at the same time, we're also running a business. And that's a whole nother ballgame. And we just wanted to talk about it, you know, talk about what that's like, what it's like for us, at least. We can only share our own experience. We can't speak for other people. So shall we just roll into that, Mercedes?
Yeah,
5
we can
years
do
for
that.
you. Congratulations.
Yeah, 5 years. So I went solo in 2019, November 2019. And before that, it was always a side hustle. I started my side hustle business in 2011 or 2012, basically around the time that I released Simple Strength, which was 2015. But I had been kind of dabbling on the side for online coaching. So I've always been kind of like an in-person coach. Back when I was a tennis player, I would do a lot of in-person coaching as well. And then transitioned to climbing. I coached in gyms. But once I moved to Seattle, it became more of a side hustle of online coaching because all of my clients in Denver wanted to continue working with me. And I had to figure out how to do that. No one was doing it at the time. Had to use spreadsheets, really janky, like illustrations of exercises, and you're like, good luck. I hope you know how to do this exercise. Yeah, it was weird back then to do it, but people were excited to continue working together online. And then eventually, like as the technology got better, you know, it allowed me to continue coaching people at a larger scale for online coaching. Yeah, and then in 2019, you know, I was a manager at the Seattle Bouldering Project for many years, and you know, it just wasn't giving me the fulfillment that I was looking for. What I loved about working there was the community. Like that gym was my family, and they still are. But I wasn't coaching. You know, I was a manager, and that is like not the thing I want to be doing. And coaching is really what fills my cup. And so that's what I decided to do in 2019, and really glad I did it, but man, running a business is not easy. I don't know if people have these advertisements that come up on their Instagram, or if you've dabbled in online business and then there's all of these promises of like, you can make all of this money really easily if you like run your own business. And that's not true. So, it takes a lot of work, and you don't learn a lot of these skills being a coach, or like, so my background in education is sports science, like exercise science, human movement, sports conditioning. I didn't learn how to use software or how to run a business or how to market. Like, none of this was in my curriculum, and this was stuff that I just had to like dive in and start learning on my own and talking to other coaches who were doing it. That I think that's where I've learned a lot of my kind of like business knowledge, is from other coaches and just having relationships with them and understanding like what works for them, what doesn't. Those things might work for me, they might not. And it is literally just experimenting and experimenting and experimenting. Yeah, and it can be exhausting. But yeah, it is not easy, but it is very fulfilling if you can figure out how to do it, And
what do you think are the maybe top 3 things that you find most challenging about just running the business side of things, not the coaching side, but just running the business? What are some things that you were like, oh, I wish I never had to do this again and I could just outsource it? Because that's another thing people don't realize when you're a small business owner, because unlike a big business owner, you can't just outsource. You have to wear so many different hats. You have to do all the things. So actually, what are the top 3 hats that you wish someone else would do for you that you'd never have to do again?
Like, remember, you can hire people to do these things, but it's very expensive. Especially these days, it seems to be more and more expensive the more that online businesses are being established. And the thing that I tend to do that I really wish I didn't have to do was a lot of like the website development, design, putting landing pages together, creating the automations. So like, if you sign up for something with us, all of like when you put your email in, there's like a trigger that happens in the background, and I have to set all of that up, and that takes a lot of time. And it's not like a set it and forget it. Like, those landing pages kind of have to change often with the products that we're creating, or the like our master classes that we do. Every time we have a new one, we have to create all of that. So that is something I really wish I didn't have to do. Like, I actually don't mind doing it. It's I actually really love design work. It's like a creative outlet, but when it's like time crunched and I have to do it, I almost have no time to do it. It feels like a burden. So yeah, that is one thing for sure. Please, someone do it for me.
And it really is amazing how much time, I don't want to say gets lost, but how much time it takes to just do all these nitty gritty things, right? I will say, even just sending an email through the platform that we use. So for people to understand this, whenever we send emails, like you open your email inbox, you get this email from us, and it's like, oh, they just send this email. Besides the fact that we have to write and draft and edit an email, like we have to do the writing of it, but then to just put it into the platform, that sends it to all these people, and editing the email in the platform itself, the formatting is not just like a Word document, it's different. And every single platform is different. So even just that, it's mind-blowing to me that just copying and pasting an email that's already written into the platform and then just editing it in the platform so it looks not like junk. That alone, just the copy and pasting aspect, a ready to go email, probably it might in 20 minutes. This is a copy and paste. This should be a 1 minute situation. And this is just sending an email that's already been written, right? You then have to write the email. So even just like sending an email is like easily 1 or 2 hours. If it's a fancy email, it's more, right? Mm-hmm. It just adds up. And so Mercedes was talking about these landing pages. I think some people might not know what this is, but every time you go online and you read about a course, of course, Mercedes has a website, and that's pretty much, once that's done, it doesn't change too often, right? But then each new course, each new offer, each new free webinar, whenever we do like a free event for people, just for you to click on a link and then go and sign up for this event, that is a web page that needs to be made by a person, which is Mercedes in our case. And it's just ridiculous how much time it takes to do these things. Or even just like going back to the podcast, recording the podcast, that's the fun part, right? But even just the podcast needs to be planned, notes need to be taken. We need to think about it. The content itself takes time. But then, the editing of the podcast and just all these little things, uploading it to all these different platforms. It is wild how much time all these things take. Even just literally the busy work. Even when you know how to run a business, all the logistics of it, just the busy work itself is so much. And then, obviously there's a ton of other things that are part of owning and running a business, which is, marketing and brainstorming new ideas and having new offerings and all these things. That's a whole nother ballgame. It really takes so much work. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I do want to quickly just give a quick shout out to Danny, who he's a Modus member, but he volunteers to edit our audio for the podcast. So thank you so much, Danny, for all of your help since the beginning. He's done this for a year,
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And he does a really great job. And yeah, that would be something I would also if I had to do that on top, because I edit all of the video for the podcast. So if I also had to do the audio, I'd probably be really sad right now. So yeah, thanks, Danny. And Kelly is my sister-in-law. She actually helps to do recently all of the thumbnails and make sure the emails go out. So thank you to her. She's been helping out a lot. And then Katja, thank you for you have been doing a lot of the topic research stuff, and so when we're ready to record, we know what we're gonna do. So it takes a lot. It takes a team, and my team is not that big, and luckily I have people who are willing to help and volunteer for some of these things, which is awesome. But I think maybe if I were a coach who just wanted to run a minimal business, it wouldn't look like this. It wouldn't I wouldn't have a website like I do. I use Kajabi, which is the software that runs the website, the emails, the courses, things like that. And not all entrepreneurs will use that platform because it's actually really expensive. But to me, it's the Porsche of platforms. So I chose that because I wanted my business to feel and look high quality. And because I believe the content that we have is high quality. And I also have big visions for this business. And, so I put myself in this situation where this is kind of a beast to run. And I could have had the option of, you know what, I'm just going to do one-on-one coaching and potentially just send out emails from my Gmail account and make it look not super great. And then maybe have my Instagram or something, but this was a choice. Every step of the way has been a choice for the future. And yeah, I would love to have a really kind of a bigger presence for Modus and have a bigger educational platform. And yeah, and honestly, in 2019 and before that, I was one of the only coaches that I knew that was female, first of all. I was one of the few who had a CSCS, which is a certified strength and conditioning certification. Not a lot of coaches in general have that certification back in the day for climbers. And there was no niche really for climbing coaching. Climbers were very adverse to training. You'd say, hey, I can help you with some of these drills. And people are why would I do that? I'm just going to climb. And so to see the evolution of that, and in 2018, 2019, I really saw okay, I'm definitely making a name for myself as a climbing coach. And then the pandemic happened, and then everyone is a climbing coach now, which is really difficult. It can be difficult to filter through all of that. And it has been difficult on my own mindset and my ego. It has hurt my ego a little bit. But after a couple of years of just kind of bumping around and trying to put my name out there, I've come to a place of, okay, I understand that I am not an influencer. I am a coach. And just that shift in mindset in the last like year has helped me so much to show up and do the things, to be confident in what I'm delivering. So like that journey has been interesting and a little difficult as well. But it's been really helpful to have you, Katja, as, you know, one of our Modus coaches and just kind of a staple in what we're offering. I don't know. I think it also like kind of separates us as well. Because it is a lot more like quality driven rather than quantity, and influencery. No diss on influencers on Instagram. Like they don't make a lot of money. It's like that sucks. Like influencers, like their lifestyle, it is, I don't envy them. It is a difficult thing to do. But knowing that we're coaches and we're doing really awesome things, like that feels really good. And that feels like the right thing. It feels like the right thing that I'm doing. You know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of this. Gosh, see, this is one of the things I like about this podcast, is that you and I get to have these intentional conversations that we might not even have in the same way outside of podcasting. So I have all these questions for you. Do you want to dig in a little bit more, Mercedes? You want to share a little bit more?
Yeah.
You said that something hurt your ego. Like maybe the pandemic hit and now everybody became a coach. What about that was hard for you?
I think it's that I had put so much effort into carving out a niche and for people to see me as a coach who, like, I put so much work into getting credentials and really like elevating myself to a certain level. You know, I have a master's in human movement and sports conditioning. Like I made sure that I knew what the fuck I was talking about, you know? And then to see this rapid shift on Instagram where now anyone can say anything and now they're an expert. And so that's I think that hurt pretty bad. Like I was like, man, I make sure that I'm saying the right thing, and I don't always say the right thing, but you know, I will admit that I'm wrong if someone says, hey, what about XYZ? And I also make sure that it's backed by science. Like we don't do a lot of that. We don't reference a research study. You know, that just tends to like complicate things. It can make things difficult to follow and using terminology that isn't relatable. So I used to do a lot of like research backed information, and now I've just been doing it long enough. Like we know the research is there to support what we're saying. But yeah, I just think the amount of quote unquote climbing coaches that are out there, I think that became like popular on Instagram with a lot of followers, that they're probably a lot better at like entertaining their viewers. You know, I'm not an entertainer and I am a coach. I'm an educator. And initially I thought that was something being taken away from me. Like, oh man, I put all of like more than 10 years of work into educating myself, into putting myself out there. Being a female in this industry, not easy. It's a little bit easier now. Like I think maybe people have more respect for female coaches, but it wasn't easy for a very long time, and just like struggling through that whole process. And it's not easy to create something from nothing that didn't exist before, but now it exists and it's like a totally normal thing. And I guess part of it was like, oh, a lot of these people didn't have to go through the same struggle. And honestly, like now I'm glad, like, especially for female coaches, I'm glad that, you know, like, I hope that I was part of the change for female coaches. I hope that I have helped them in indirect ways so that now they have a platform. Yeah. So like now my ego is not really as affected. Instagram is difficult for everyone now. But yeah, that's how my ego was affected initially.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. You kind of like already hinted, because I asked you for the 3 different hats like that you could give up, you know, and I'm sure Instagram would be one of them. I know Mercedes, Instagram as a whole, but I don't think we need to elaborate on this because most people are probably aware of the fact of Instagram. Like, we like to be out there, we like to be on Instagram. It is actually a great way to connect with people. I'm for sure, it can be a great way to connect with people, but we all also know the downsides of Instagram, right? I just recently heard Elizabeth Gilbert, who I just absolutely love, talk about it, how it's like this party drug, it's like, oh, it seems so great at first, and then you take it, and afterwards you're like, oh, actually, I don't feel good. So it's kind of this balance. I mean, obviously, it's just like how we use it. If we can use it in moderation, it has great potential for connection, but one big downside for Instagram is the very short format. And like you said, and that's one of the things I've observed working with Mercedes for the last 3 years, is that you do really love quality and you love education, and Instagram just isn't the greatest platform for that. And in fact, that is one of the reasons we did start the podcast too, was just to have a longer format to talk about things, to actually have a conversation and use more than 20 words to describe a concept. And that's also why you like YouTube, which YouTube is a whole nother beast, because in some ways it's also so much work to make those videos, especially if you're someone like Mercedes who really likes to do things well. And in some ways, I don't want to say we didn't do this podcast well, because I think we are doing this podcast well. But what we're not doing is what you said earlier, and what you meant with optimization is we're not worrying about the algorithm so much. We're not worrying about, because just like anything online, there's a game you can play. There's an algorithm you could use. There's ways to just, get us out there more. And in some ways, I know it would help us. And in many ways, I wish that for you, Mercedes, because just like you said, you put so much effort into anything you do, really. And I can only assure people that the training plans that we offer are amazing because of all this extensive research and experience that Mercedes has put into them. They're just so, so good. And but it's one thing to have a really great product. Like Mercedes itself is this amazing product, but it's another one to advertise the product and get it out there, right? It's a whole nother thing for people to just see the product for what it is. And that's what's also hard about business, because we're not trained in business, And so thank you for sharing all of that.
What about you, Katja? You had a transition. So when you started with Modus, you had kind of a pretty big transition.
Yeah, it was big. It didn't feel so big to me initially, just because of maybe just of where I was at with my life. What I mean with that, at the time when I started my own business, I didn't have the pressure of needing to generate a certain income. And that is very helpful. I will say that is very helpful. Now, my thing has always been, and still is, and Mercedes knows this, and she's very flexible and kind about it. My thing is always time. So my most precious resource is time. It's how I live my life, how I like to parent, and the things that I like to do, and the intentions I like to bring to life. I just don't believe in the hustle mentality anymore. I used to hustle so much. I was a triple type A person. I was one of these people who just always looked super successful on the outside. I did all these things, and I just don't care about that anymore. I don't want to live my life like that anymore. I want to do a good job and be present with the people that are around me. And that means not spreading myself too thin and not doing too many things. And so in some ways the transition was, and I'd always had dreamed about doing a business, and then I get to do business with you, Mercedes. So that was like a pretty fun start. And I was really fortunate in that. I think one of the things I've always appreciated about our relationship is that I always feel like I can talk to you openly and honestly and be very transparent. And that's something that just is something that my heart, I just need as a person to be able to do that. Otherwise, it would have been really hard. And I remember expressing reservations to you and being nervous about becoming a climbing coach and all these things. There's a lot that I could go into about my personal journey becoming a climbing coach, my own insecurities and all these things. But you're really kind about it. And you actually offered me to help you as an assistant coach for one of the programs. And it was amazing, the feedback that I got from the program, from our athletes, from our clients. And so it was really wonderful to see you kind of provide me with the right experience and context that I needed. Like, you weren't pushing me too much, but you were really being like, no, Katja, I believe in you so much. I think you'd be amazing, but how about you gonna try it in this non-committing kind of way? And that was really wonderful for me. So that's a really great start. From that regard, working with you was really amazing. That's probably my number one favorite thing about Modus Athletica is Mercedes Pohlmeier. She's my number one favorite thing. And my second favorite thing about working for Modus Athletica is all the athletes that we work with. It's just been really amazing. I would say the hardest thing, Mercedes, you might actually not know this. You might, when I tell you about it, you might be like, that makes sense because you know me. But I don't think I've ever told you what was the hardest thing for me. And I have to laugh because it also kind of reflects the difficulties of running a business, especially as a small business owner. But oh my goodness, all the different platforms and technologies and how to do things are just like, I was so overwhelming for me. All the different I don't even know where to start, but I was just like, I remember just like crying, just using train arrays as a coach and just trying to find the things that you told me to find. So it was not even so much like making the programs as one thing, but then just navigating the platform, because you guys have to understand, everybody who coaches with us, we have this training app that's called Train Arrays. You pull it up on your phone and there's a nice training plan on it that you can just follow. It's awesome for the client. But as a coach, just to put in the exercises, just to put them in the way that they appear to you in a perfect way. Again, the training plan is already written, but now putting it into the platform, just like the email, I struggle with that so much. And I just get so frustrated at technology because it never works the way you want it. And then all of a sudden, all the things were not saved and everything is lost. Anyway, it's all a mess because these platforms, while they're great, they're not Microsoft. I mean, even Microsoft Word crashes, but these are still somewhat medium-sized businesses. So they are buggy. And that is not my thing. And I just remember being so overwhelmed. And now, 3 years into this business, I am slightly less overwhelmed. And still, I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about maybe putting out this mindset course, and I'm very passionate about it. I don't want to talk too much about it because I don't know what's going to happen, because I'm like, oh my God, even just, if I could just put all my ideas and all the content somewhere and someone else would do the technology aspect of it. If I was just like, I'm hosting this retreat in person, just come here. I have a whiteboard, I have me, and have exercises and things we can talk about. I would do it tomorrow. I have all the content for it. I have content for days. In fact, I don't know how to put it into a short course. But just thinking about the technology, the videos, Kajabi, all these things, I'm like, oh my God, I do not know if I can do this. And then once you have the course ready to go, that's so much work. Now you have to launch it, meaning you have to have all the advertisement around it. And advertisement around it means I personally actually don't even mind putting content on Instagram. That's not even the hardest part for me. But then again, you need another landing page. Oh my gosh. Anyway, I don't want to go into depth because I could talk about it, but that's kind of like the hard part for me. As I said, it's like all the technology, and I don't know actually, Mercedes, if you love technology, but I feel like you do, and so you don't.
I
Okay.
really don't. I
Oh,
don't
that's so
love
funny.
technology. I don't, but I think it's the same, like what you were saying about like there's a mountain that you're like, oh, I can climb that, and then there's mountains that you're like, no, I can't climb that. And so for me, technology is really annoying, but somehow I'm able to figure it out. Maybe because, I mean, I did have my first year in college was graphic design. And so I had to learn.
I didn't know that. That makes sense. Mercedes makes beautiful graphics. And in fact, she won't let me make them for good reason. Yeah. But now I know why. I'm like, oh my gosh, she makes beautiful graphics. And I'm like, I won't even try anymore because she's just going to do it so well. So that's.
But yeah, so I think that first year really, like, I didn't know anything about software. And then all of a sudden, this first year, it's like you learn everything in the Adobe suite. And like I learned how to like build a website with code. I, learned Illustrator. I learned Photoshop, but like, and at the time, even those softwares weren't as in depth as they are now. I think if I tried to use those softwares, I'd die right now. Like there's no way. But I think that helped me understand the mechanics of a software, and like they all kind of follow similar rules, and so it's annoying. But I'm able to climb that mountain For sure.
Just to explain this analogy, I gave that analogy to Mercedes when we were still offline, because we always talk about what we want to talk about. It's like we're having two conversations before we record. And I told her how, sometimes, there's big projects like in work or, climbing even. And I like analogies, as you probably know. And sometimes there's these mountains that you look at and you're like, oh my gosh, they're really huge. But you have the skills, you can do it. It's just going to be a lot of work, right? We talked about this. And then I told her, but then there's mountains that you look at and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't even have the skills to even attempt this mountain. It's like so scary and overwhelming looking. And I told her technology for me is that. But so that's why she was saying for her technology, it is still a huge mountain. So it's still difficult to do, but it's a mountain that she thinks and she can really tackle. And I will say too, for people who don't know our business, or maybe who know our business a little bit, is that we also have this membership, which we love. And when we created this membership, it was Mercedes' idea a long time ago. It's her big vision, is to really bring a community together of people who train and also make training affordable, but in a very high quality type way, which is why she launched this membership. Well, we launched it together, but she had a secret membership before I even joined. It's really amazing, but let me tell you, having a membership means even more platforms and even more things to do. And really, it's just amazing. I do wonder what we could create if someone else would just take care of all the technology things. We would be able to get so much done. And also the graphic design and all the designing and even just doing photo shoots. I mean, it's really amazing. All these things that go into a business. It's kind of wild.
And it, even though the business is like, we run an online business, I don't have a place that I need to maintain. And I think people might often believe that online businesses aren't very expensive to run. When you consider all of the technology that you have to use, and now that everyone's on like you have to pay a monthly subscription, it gets very expensive, very, very expensive to run an online business these days. But again, I made these choices because I want to create kind of more of a beast of a business. And who knows, maybe things will change slightly in the future. But yeah, the technology and having good technology is really important for the user, like on the user side. I think that's really the most important, is that our clients can easily navigate this stuff. Even trainerize could be easy for a lot of people, but it's definitely challenging for some other people, even just using apps. So I don't know. We can't be perfect, and we try to choose the best softwares for our people so that they can easily share and we can easily put content up. But it all takes work.
I know, and easily, like putting content. I mean, I don't want to get into it, but I think we've made this point that the back end is a lot of work.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah.
But we're here because we love doing what we're doing, but we also do want to make some money from it. That's the thing, right? That's the thing with a business that people have to keep in mind. It's one thing to do what you're passionate about, but in the end, it is also important to make money. It really is. And I think that's what's hard sometimes, working with your passion, because I was actually reflecting on this, and I was reflecting on some of the joy that the business has taken from my own climbing life a little bit in some ways. I'm trying to bring this back because it is still a business, and we all like need to make money, and so it's tricky when your passion is your business, and that's the thing you're also making money from, right? So it kind of gets all a little bit muddy. But so far we've been really fortunate, I feel like, working with the people we're working with, and to me that's very inspiring and very fulfilling, as you said.
Yeah. In the end, it's all about our clients, and our clients are amazing.
They really are. Yeah. So thank you all for being part of Modus. And yeah, any last thoughts? Anything you want to share? 5 years in business, Mercedes. Where do you want to be in 5 years? Another 5 years, just imagine.
I don't know. That is a tough, like, I know what I would love.
That's what I want to hear.
That is what I mean, so what, in 5 years from now, I'm going to be 47. Wow. Yeah. I think 5 years from now, in terms of the feeling that I want, because,
Mm-hmm.
things can change so rapidly, but the feeling that I would want at that stage would be ease. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, things will always be difficult to running a business, no matter how big or small, how many people on your team. It's going to be challenging because you have to make decisions all the time. But I want kind of the rest of it, like even just confidence in myself. Like from where I am today compared to 5 years ago, I have so much more confidence in what I'm doing. um I have a clearer vision of like what it is, like the people that I want to work with. I still like working with a diverse range of people, but when it comes to marketing, you do have to kind of niche down. And I'm starting to understand like who I really really love to work with. And so I would just hope that that will just continue, and that I'll have a lot more confidence and ease 5 years from now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Thank you for sharing, Mercedes.
Yeah.
I
And
think,
thanks
yeah.
everyone for being on this journey. If you've been with me since the beginning, oh my gosh, thank you so much. We actually have a member in Modus. His name's Kai. He has probably been the longest person who, is that true? He's one of the longest like Modus crew. Like I know he reached out when I wrote my book. But he's like still a client to this day, which is like crazy to me. So thanks, Kai.
Mm-hmm.
But so you're probably listening to this around Black Friday, is my guess, and we'll probably have something special for a 5-year anniversary discount. So keep an eye for that. I don't know what that is yet. I have to make a decision.
Yeah.
Another decision I have to make about the about the business. But just know that there will be something special. So make sure you check out our Instagram. Yeah,
An
and
email
you'll
list.
get the update and the email. Yeah,
Yeah. And if you're not on an email list, you can go to our website and subscribe to our email list, and
yeah,
you get all the goodies.
mm-hmm.
Good content, long form content, not short form content.
Yeah.
Okay,
Cool.
thank you so much for sharing, Mercedes. And
Yeah. Thanks, Katja.
okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.